Thank you so much for being here, and to our guests here. We'll introduce those in a minute. Now, we're talking about investing in education to build an inclusive, digital and green workforce by 2050. I had the pleasure of meeting these guys online last week and talking about what we're going to talk about today. Out of those three words, inclusive, digital and green, the word inclusive came out very strongly. So it's probably what we're going to more focus on rather than the digital and the green, which has been talked about well yesterday. But I'm sure we'll touch on those as well. So my name is Rick. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at British University, Vietnam. For those of you who were here yesterday, you may have seen an introduction from our COO, Ms. Thuy Nguyen, who talked about our university and how it's trying to be a green university. And she showed a presentation on that. So I hope you saw some of that. Now, I'm so glad that this presentation, our talk today, is on day 2, because day 1 was full of many wonderful things that we could all witness. Obviously, there was parallel sessions, so I couldn't be at everything, but I did witness some really exciting things yesterday, starting with some of the highlights that I picked out, starting from Madame Ha Tu Tan, I hope I pronounced that right, who talked to us about, or introduced us to the word greenwashing. Now, many of you have probably heard about that before. I hadn't, so it was quite a sort of eye-opener for me to sort of see this word greenwashing. And then later, we had a wonderful session in the afternoon led by Lin Quek, again, I hope I pronounced that properly, from Singapore, who talked to us about 50 shades of green, or 50 shades of green washing. And she talked to us about green washing, green wishing, green highlighting, green hushing, green crowding, green labelling, green shifting, and lastly, green watching. Now, I'm not going to describe what all those were, if you want to know what those are, find Lynn and pick her out, but it was a wonderful presentation from her and very eye-opening as well. We had a wonderful lunch session yesterday. I was privileged to be invited to this lunch session where we heard about 8 entrepreneurs talk about the kind of work they were doing, which was humbling, to say the least. It was a wonderful session. Ambassador Stephanie Copus-Campbell made a comment during that lunch where she's the Australian ambassador for gender equality. She made a comment during that lunch which she said she was so inspired by the Vietnamese positive energy in the greening space, in particular in terms of the gender issues, which is her role over here. She was inspired by what we are all doing here in Vietnam, which was wonderful. Now, I was at that lunch, I was privileged to be able to be sat next to Miss Lung from Eco Solutions. And I was intrigued why she had left a steady career overseas to come back to Vietnam and start up her company, Eco Solutions. And she remarked that it was easy to think about and talk about sustainability and green issues, but it was a totally different thing to actually do it, which that sort of struck a chord with me. And so as we enter this session with these guys here, I think you're about to meet 4 people here who have actually done it, and they can tell you what it is like to actually do it. And so that's a very important thing for this session as well. So I know this panel will talk about green and technology, and I'm sure we'll discuss those things, but we're talking about the workforce. We're talking about how we can be active in the selection of our workforce. Now, as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor of a university, I have 2 kinds of things to consider. One is the workforce, but one is also our student cohort. So how do we deal with inclusivity within both those scenarios? For those of you who were, excuse me, at this talk yesterday by Miss Thuy, I'm so proud. I've worked for 2 universities in this country. I'd say the first one wasn't very inclusive in terms of its cohort of leadership. But in terms of the second one I'm at, BUV, and the numbers are, and I remember these, I used to always be proud to say that 50% of my leadership were women. But I realised yesterday when I went through the numbers, it's far more than that. 15 out of 19 my leadership are Vietnamese. 15 of the 19 are Vietnamese. 11 of those 15 are women, and 10 of those 11 women are under 45. So we've got a very, very young, dynamic, gender-balanced leadership team, which is a particularly important thing for me. So I think that I can actually say that we're doing it. We're actually living it, and we're walking the walk, so to speak. So before I introduce you to this beautiful panel here, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context. In 2021, in Vietnam, 29% of employees were in the agricultural sector, 33% were in industry, and 38% were in the service sector. In 2022, 11% of the domestic labour force were highly skilled. 26% were trained workers with degrees, which meant that 63% weren't skilled at all. In 2022, Vietnam was a country which was, quite surprisingly, the 14th highest level of female employment in eligible capita in the world. That's pretty good, 14th for female employment. The highest was Iceland, with 74%, and then the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, were all in the top 10. I don't think there's any surprise there. In 2023, after years of economic reform, the labour force had doubled in Vietnam from 27 million in 1986 to 52.5 million in 2023. Now, here's an interesting fact. 37% of the working age Vietnamese are located in urban areas, which means that 62% are located in the provinces, in the rural areas. Now, despite their growing importance, there are wide shortages in advanced skills such as AI and technology. While the Vietnamese government is investing heavily in AI and digital technologies, the country faces shortages. Vietnam's skilled labour force has been a key point of interest for foreign firms of late. This is on the back of a strong push from Vietnamese government towards developing the country's high-tech industries. So basically, the demand is there, but the supply isn't. I'm going to now introduce you to our four guests and let them introduce themselves very, very briefly before we get into some questions. But I know that having talked to these guys previously, these guys are going to really address these issues about the demand is there, but the supply is not. Can I just start with Mr. Huang?
Thank you, Professor Bennett. My name is Huan Nguyen. I'm a consultant in the NPN Consulting Group with my team here. But before we start, could I say a few things about, thank you so much, Mimi and Vân, for inviting us to this conference. And this is my first time attending this conference. I had to say this is a very professional, very, very outstanding conference. I just want to thank you for that. So if everyone give them a round of applause, right? And on top of that, if you didn't attend last night event at Ross, it was wonderful. The wine was free flowing, the alcohol was there. And I'm hoping that all of you are having a hangover so that I can talk about all the BS stuff today. But one thing I cannot fool people is my partner there, Miss Bích Yên. You're talking about outstanding and the smartest woman in the world that I know. She's is my partner. She's hold over 200 patents in semiconductors worldwide. So Bích Yên is. I want everyone to acknowledge how powerful she is. Back to us. I'm a former naval officer for the United States Navy. I retired from the Navy as a Rear Admiral a couple of years ago. We started this company mainly to work to basically help the underserved community, especially women and people from the rural areas, to have a career. We want them to give them the opportunity for them to excel, to bootstrap themselves, getting better, helping them because so that they can have better financially, they can get better socially in the world. But on top of that, the power that they bring, the support, and then just the wonderful things that they can bring to the world is through education. So our focus is really about connecting different organizations, connecting the people, training the people to help with the economy, bringing Vietnam to a better future, but not just Vietnam, but all around the world.
Thank you, Juan. would you like to introduce yourself? Another Juan.
Yes, I'm Juan as well. It's
Brother.
very good name, very good name. So I am formerly of a software, was part of a software company that we grew, American-based software company that was primarily Vietnamese owned. And we grew it and we sold it to a private equity firm. And when we sold it, the group of us started looking for investments, particularly in Vietnam. And one of those investments was, or the largest investment, was in a Vietnamese company that primarily was founded to employ disabled people, right? And so that's the background as probably so why I'm here. But what we found is that being inclusive can be a strategic advantage, and we can talk about that over the course of this panel. But that's why I'm here. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Juan. Ms. Fung?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Phương, the Country Director of True Commerce Vietnam, a leading center of excellence of True Commerce Global based in USA. About True Commerce, we specialize in providing global trading partner connectivity solution, including electronic data interchange and supply chain collaboration to streamline business interaction and enhance the efficiency. Prior to True Commerce, we operated like DI Central Vietnam, a subsidiary of the DI Central US. Yeah. And 3 years ago, True Commerce acquired DI Central. It has been an incredible journey working alongside with talent leader like Hun Le, who will be here with us today. And you know, this environment has provided me the opportunity for learning and growth as a woman in leadership. And one of my achievements is that I successfully built the team with a headcount from the beginning to become 300 so far.
Oh, wow.
300 headcount so far. Yeah. And in our organization, we prioritize initiative related to environmental protection and policy supporting the hiring for individuals with disability.
Okay.
Yeah. And as our core, we are dedicated, to building an inclusive and sustainable future workforce. So I'm very happy to be here today to open any question and collaboration.
Thank you, Phil. And we're going to hear more in detail about this later on. Last but not least, of course, Mr. Andreas, European, with Bosch, who's been here for many years. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andreas Abing. I'm here in Vietnam for more than 5 years now, and with Bosch for more than 40 years, and of that, 23 years in Asia. Workforce development is a topic which is really very close to my heart. In a lot of countries, you need that, and also especially here in Vietnam. We are committed to this country. We run various companies, develop software engineers, but also in the plant in which I'm responsible as technical plant manager, technicians with high skills, since we are a high-tech company, which is needing really extremely skilled workforce.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Andreas. Now, Mr. Huang, I'm going to start with you, and it's our privilege to have you here. I think he glossed over this, but you're the only Vietnamese admiral in the U.S. Navy, or retired of it, so I think that's...
Well, I'm the first, but I'm
first.
hoping not the last.
So congratulations, it's lovely to have you
Thank
here. But could you share some of your insights into the potential partnerships and projects that you've been involved in, exploring with organizations such as NIC, the Vietnam National Innovation Center, and the National University of Singapore to train engineers and other workers, particularly for the semiconductor sector. How can these initiatives contribute to shaping the future, perhaps here in Vietnam?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. So our organization, as I mentioned, is a small organization, NPN Consulting Group. We call it NCG. There's just four of us. We are scientists, engineers, farmers, investors, and all. Our goal is, or our passion is really about developing the workforce here in Vietnam and helping them with the digital economy. So a lot of things that we've been talking about, semiconductor is one of the key area for any country in the world to go forward, because it's going to drive right now, I think based on 2024, it drives about like 600 million trillion dollars, right, for the global economy. So for us, we need to partner up with other organizations such as NUS and Van Lang University here in Vietnam to develop a couple of tracks. One is for the training of engineers, semiconductor engineer, and the other one is about technician. I'm going to talk about the semiconductor engineer real quick because that's a long-term project. We just put together a partnership with NUS and Van Lang where they can support each other, providing a dual degree program for semiconductor engineering, training here in Vietnam, and then eventually the last 2 years, a year or two, will be spending at NUS to get their degree. The other track is for technician, right? Because that's one of the areas that needs a lot of help. The demand signal all around the world is a lot of technician demand for companies such as TSMC or Samsung or Intel. One of the projects that we're going to start this summer is it's basically a seminar program that train the basic of semiconductor to engineer technicians so that we can provide further deeper training. This is an area where we can train a technician for 3 to 6 months to a year, right, and allow to place them in organization to get a good job overseas or here in Vietnam.
Okay. We talked about this last week, the difference between, we talked about supply and demand. So as at a university, I gave some facts earlier that perhaps 2/3 of the country is unskilled. They're not, degree educated or trained. But when it comes to universities and students perhaps wanting to apply, what the government wants and what the government's looking for, or not the government, but the country is looking for engineers and technicians. What happens when the fact that the actual workforce doesn't really want to do that? They're in a different world where they want to do. So, for example, if I offer a program in technical semiconductors at our university, there is not going to be a queue around the block to do it. But if I offer a degree in game design or graphic design, yes, there is a queue around the block to do it. So what happens when the demand is there, but the workforce perhaps isn't there to do it? Or can it be there? And you talked there about training within 6 months to 1 year. Is that the other option?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up a good point about demand signals as well as the supply, right? When we discuss and when the government provide a certain project or certain numbers, certain goal or objective saying, hey, we're going to train 15,000 engineers, for example. The question is whether they want to be trained or not and whether there's a place for employment for them or not. So I think that for us to entice the people and also to get people to really excited about these programs is we need to develop a whole ecosystems of support. Right. Yeah. Not just training people, but the placement of employment of these folks, where they're going to be able to work, how they're going to be able to get ahead, and not only that, focusing on the underserved community, because I think that they don't have a chance to be able to get into these programs, especially the rural areas. But with the technology these days, such as communication and internet, and COVID proved to us that we can actually provide these online programs, allow these folks to study and getting a good job. I think that's the key to get.
Well, you've sort of unlocked another avenue of inquiry there in terms of that whole difficult piece between, as I said again, 60% of the population is in rural communities. So how do we get to those people? Is it a case of bringing them to us, or is it a case of us going to them? And perhaps online is the way to do that.
I think we need to
Yeah.
bring it to them.
Yeah.
Right. Because they don't have the ability to come to us, and they don't even know about it. So it's for us to reach out to those underserved community, to the folks outside of the major metropolitan areas, and get it to them. Because it is such a waste if we are not training those folks. Right. And on top of that, like I said, we need to provide them with the vision that you're going to be able to get a good job, support their family, instead of just continue to do labor work that don't see a future for them.
Thank you, Juan. Look, you've provided an absolutely perfect segue to Andreas here in Bosch, Bosch has this, he's going to talk to us about their education program for people who come into them. Andreas, I've got quite a long question for you, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go through this. Bosch is recognized as a foremost company that heavily invests in the development of high-tech young talent. The commitment is demonstrated through initiatives such as your vocational training programs and strategic partnerships with over 12 key universities in Vietnam. Now, these efforts aim to cultivate a highly skilled technical workforce, proficient in areas such as AI and whole range of different technical areas. Could you provide further insights into these initiatives that and how Bosch implements them? And how do these initiatives aim to address the growing demand for highly technical skilled technical skills such as AI in the workforce?
Yeah, Rick, it's a pleasure for me to elaborate on that topic.
Yeah.
Let's say in 1994, we established here in Ho Chi Minh a representative office, and we have grown from that time now to a company with more than 6,000 associates here in Vietnam. Locations, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, Da Nang, Dong Nai. So we have established 3 research facilities, development facilities here in that country. And for that, we need, of course, highly skilled workforce. Our Bosch Software Solutions company is grown to more than 3,000 people. They need IT professionals, which are not yet there, or not to the fullest extent. So they do special hackathons, they do embedded academies where they bring in teams from universities to get them interested in coding and go. This includes also AI, this IoT. So therefore, all these things are included and will be trained. We, as a plant here in Dong Nai, we are the largest CVT push belt producing plant in the world, and we have a high-tech status received from the government, and for this high-tech investment which we did here, we have to have workforce, really very, very dedicated, trained workforce. For that purpose, we have set up already 11 years ago so-called vocational training program together with our partners Lila Matu and AHK, and we educate them in a German standard program which Bosch is doing in more than 60 locations all over the world, and we do that also here. We have shown that to the governments, and we really would like to encourage others to take also such programs over, because these skills for these high complex machines which we have right now are needed. And the same thing is also for semiconductor, which come in the future. This workforce can be also very easily moved into such new skills. We adapted our program over the period of time for additional needs, so that we have also Industry 4.0 schemes in that, which we simply need over time and more demanded.
Okay, so we're talking about getting that workforce in. Where we're going to go next is a very interesting conversation with Mr. Huang and Ms. Phung, talking about statistics from the Vietnamese government state that there are about 2.1 million people in Vietnam with disabilities who actually can work but who are unemployed. That's a pretty frightening statistic, which costs Vietnam 3% of its GDP. Can you elaborate, in your experiences, on strategies that you've taken in your organizations, how to invest and build in inclusive job pathways for trying to get to those people and give those people opportunities? Maybe Ms. Fung first?
Let me share my experience. In our company, we believe that providing job for people with disability is not only our responsibility toward the society, but it also our ethic as well. So that's the reason why we have we offer the opportunity for the people with disability, because we believe that somehow their skill sets and knowledge still match our requirement. Yeah, and we believe that with their talent and they also have the perseverance. Yeah, and if we offer a good opportunity for them to work, so we can get their loyalty too. So, yeah, and based on this, we had the program to collaborate with the Disability Resource and Development Organization, to bring to hire some people with disability, and I can see that there is still has some challenge here. The first thing is about the office infrastructure, and you already know that in Vietnam, some building don't meet the disability requirement. Yeah, and the second thing is because we lack of experience to working with people with disability. Yeah, and the last one is the people with disability, they lack of skill and knowledge. Yeah, so this is something we figure out. There are some challenges for us. Yeah, and what we have done so far is the first thing is we will have some office remodeling, to meet their demand. And the second thing is we provide equipment, and equipment to help them feel comfort at the office. And we also provide the transportation allowance, and we conduct the health check twice a year. Yes, and on the beside of this, we also provide the training. We ensure that the equal opportunity policy, to ensure the fair treatment and opportunity for people with disability and for the women as our workplace. So I think that this is some key priority.
Sure, I'm going to push you a bit further on that, because now we're touching on very interesting ground. And I heard this yesterday, that a lot of the, let's call it the ESG issues, one thing that kept coming up recurring was, but it's quite expensive to set all that up. And then we heard other panelists saying, but we can't afford not to do it. You know, the planet or us as people can't afford not to do that. When you talk about making the buildings different and making these people feel comfortable, in what particular ways are you having to change your workplace to accommodate people with disabilities?
In the past we have to do that.
What sort of thing, like examples of how you might have changed the workplace?
For example, like when we decide to move to the new office, we will have we will work with the landlord, on the facility there. And I also invite the people from the development resource and organization. They collaborate with me to come and check the facility there to ensure that with our current employee with disability, they can match with the new office. And in case that if the office doesn't match with our requirement, I will negotiate with the landlord.
Okay, and one thing, when we had our pre-conference meetings with most Fung and Mr. Huang, often when people talk about employing people with or using a workforce with disabilities or disadvantages, they all think of handicrafts and things like this. And one of the things that you said to me was, no, this is totally different. This is, employees who are absolutely in our companies who are doing very important jobs with us, and we're just changing to accommodate them as well. You mentioned two things there, skills and knowledge. I went to a recent seminar for which is all HR leaders, and I was looking about, because as working in a university, one of our main roles is to prepare our students for the workforce, for their later life. Interesting thing that came out, they talked about this thing called ASK, or in our language, ASK, which is skills is the S and K is the knowledge. So they come to a university and get a degree, or they come to one of your institutions and get their knowledge. Then they need the skills, that's the obvious stuff, but the one thing is the A that everyone's looking for, which is their attitude, how the workforce's attitude. So it's very interesting hearing how you differentiate your workplace to make the people who, let's say, I always a bit careful using the word disability, but people who have got that opportunity to come in, to make them feel comfortable. I think that's very, very important. Thank you. Huang, how do you can talk about the same issue. How would you talk about that issue?
So we rely upon schools like yours
Yeah.
and programs like the Admirals here to find our employees, right? So the large companies, the large universities are the tent poles from which we recruit people. So here's the advantage of accommodating disability, right? If your workforce pool was 1,000 people before, if you do that accommodation, you're going to get known for it, right? And so the disabled population may be seeking you out. So instead of 1,000 people you can recruit from, now you have 1,200. Okay. So it's a competitive advantage to find the best people. So I can tell you that we're a small company, right? They would rather work for Bosch than us, right? They'd rather work for FPT than us in general. But because of our culture, we have a competitive advantage. And so we're able to hire people that just feel more comfortable with us, right? And those people are maybe higher talent than we could otherwise have if we were competing on an even playing field. And so women and those with disabilities are a disproportionate number of our managers, as an example.
Okay, lovely. Huang, have you got anything to add to the workforce in terms of accommodating people with, let's say, the normally disadvantaged, whether it be they're from the provinces, whether it be they're from an ethnic minority, whether it be they're women, any sort of comments on filling that workforce?
So it's the things that Fung talked about that you do proactively, but it's also the water cooler stuff, right? It's the stuff that you do every day. It's including those people in after work happy hours.
Yeah, sure.
It's not making a big deal of having to help them downstairs, because there are lots of stairs in Vietnam that aren't very accommodating, right? It's doing the little things, and what we found is that it starts from the top. So it starts with management, the executive team, and you have to walk the walk, and everyone else will follow, right? But you have to walk the walk.
And I think that's where we started. The point was about people listening to people yesterday saying it's very easy to talk about it and think about it, but it's very, very difficult to do it. Well, it's not difficult, but it takes a considered effort to do it, and also a cost as well. It is, you do have to build differences into the workplace to be able to accommodate.
I would think about it differently, right? Pretty much every company pays for coffee, right? Why did you pay for coffee? Because you're trying to build a certain attitude, the A, right? Putting bar rails in your bathroom is like paying for coffee. It's you're trying to build a certain culture, and that's worth something. It's not going to cost you 10% of your operational costs. It's a fractional, minor, relatively insignificant piece of what you're paying, right? And in terms of thinking about it, it doesn't take much thought to let somebody who's on crutches lean on you to walk downstairs, right? So the incremental costs, I would argue, are not significant to achieve outsized results.
So I'm coming back to I'm looking at the title here, Investing in Education. I'm sure a lot of the audience would have thought we're going to sit here and talk about universities and colleges, which we haven't done at all. We're talking about a different type of education. I'd suggest that perhaps education in terms of formal things like universities and colleges are very conservative, usually. If you think about life in general, most things you do now, and Huang touched on this, most things we do in our life now are available in two forms. You can either go and do it face-to-face or you can do it online. If I want to watch a football match, I can either go there or I can stream it online. If I want to do my grocery shopping, if Fung wants to go and buy a dress, you can do it face-to-face or online. However, the world told you that women will never buy their clothes online. That was what they used to say 30 years ago. And of course, now that's totally changed. The one place where it hasn't really developed that far is education. Still, online education is considered a bit of a sort of, especially in this country, is considered a lower option. And so therefore, universities are still and colleges are still these places where we're here, you come to us. Now, Huang, you talked about no, we need to get to those people. And so I definitely think that our online educational offerings need to be much, much better and much, much more. But the education has resisted that, but it's now having to accept that that's the case. How do you all feel about how do you get to your workforce? How do you get to these people in the provinces, these people with disabilities, the women, the ethnic minorities? How is Bosch and all these different companies getting to those people and giving them those opportunities? Andreas, can I throw that to you?
Yeah, so we are absolutely inclusive, and we encourage, of course, also all the areas to apply for jobs. I mentioned that we have already several locations established. So because software engineers, or we search all over the country. Also in our vocational program in Dong Nai, we have not only students from here, from Ho Chi Minh or from Dong Nai. So they have basically applied to it. We advertise it even now I learned with TikTok even. So therefore we go out and offer these things and promote them, because it's a very, very valuable training program. And then, of course, it is something what the interested people need to look at and choose, and have to commit for 3.5 years to get trained. With a lot of benefits in a company which is rated as a top employer here in Vietnam. And that's what we are using to advertise that. We're bringing really skills to them which are future-oriented. That's done for males, females, for people also with certain disabilities. So there is no difference if they come from a minority somewhere. So that is not looked at it simply if they need to bring the skills and the interest and then the dedication to go through this program.
And I think Bosch, obviously, when I threw to you first, I think Bosch with your brand is going to very much attract people from all over the place to come and want to work for you guys with your incredibly strong brand. How about the rest, other people? Mr. Huang, how you talked about online before. How important is that to getting, how do you get your message to the people that you need to get to?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I want to go back and touch a little bit about some of the questions you asked earlier about the other panelists. Whether the world knows this or not, but really we face a population decline here in Asia and across the world. The world, all the big companies in the world, they're going to be fighting for the workforce of the future, and that's inclusive of people with disabilities, people underserved community, and all. So we have to start it now to reach out to those communities, to reach out to those folks, and provide the training workforce of the future. You look at China. China is on the population decline. The same with Korea, and Japan. Japan is looking at coming down to about 65, 70 million folks in the next 20 years, right? So this is a real problem that we have to address and solve. With that said, right, companies such as TrueCommerce or RainScales reaching out to the disability folks, they're going to have a true advantage in the future. So how do we reach out to this community and make sure that we bring the message to them? I think that I'm a true believer in free education, in providing education to the masses. Because AI can do a lot of things, but it could not replace the human brain, for sure. So in order for us to do that, we need to provide the infrastructure in place for online education. We're going to need hybrid programs where we can have both online and in-person training that allows folks to come to places and have some of those education and trying to understand what's going on, and providing the supplemental training as well. But the point is that this is a concerted effort from government policy all the way down to university and other organizations in order to reach out and provide this kind of training and education.
Now, certainly what you talked there about hybrid, I personally believe, and we're at BUV, we're building hybrid labs, which are students can be physically there or they can be digitally there on screens, but not just little tiny screens like we use Zoom or Teams, where you've got a little tiny postage stamp size. Every student has a screen like this where they're digitally present as well as physically present. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, throw in AR and VR in the future.
Yeah.
Although you're going to be right there, right? Studying and actually interfacing, socializing with your peers, your other students, because that's where innovation comes from, right? But one thing that we do need, in essence, is really the actual hands-on experience that we don't have, and that we need to build that as well.
Okay. You started to bring up the AI issue. Certainly in education, AI is one of those dirty words where it's a bit like, I'm at the age where I started teaching when the internet was just coming on, 1994, 95, 96 kind of thing. So the internet was coming in. And the teachers in the classes were saying, right, this is your homework. I want you to go off and do this, but don't use the internet. That's cheating, And we're exactly the same position now. But when you go and work, and I emphasize how much we as educators are getting our students ready for the workforce for later on, they're going to enter a workforce where their line managers and their bosses are saying, right, I need you to use AI as much as possible. So we're in this sort of dilemma of don't use the AI because it's cheating, but when you go to the workforce, they're going to expect you to use it. Now, at our university, we've come up with an interesting 5 scale, and it's not rocket science, but everyone's now going, wow, you guys are so innovative. It's simple as this. When a student gets their assessment, it's either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. There's a number on it. 1 is don't use AI. 5 is you must use it and only use AI. And then 2, 3, and 4 are various grades of that. So how do you guys see that the introduction of AI into the workforce, particularly with our workforce is going to be so used to using this. However, how do you see that as bringing in an additional layer of inclusivity into the workforce? Mr. Huang?
The company's name is Rain Scales.
Yeah.
I chose it specifically because of the AI and rain.
Okay.
So we sort of anticipated it. And to your point, we're very big believers in AI, and it makes it's very scary, right? I'm a lawyer by training. I spend 50% less time writing contracts now.
Okay.
Right? Which if you magnify that out, then theoretically 50% of the lawyers don't have jobs, right? So it's a very scary thing in that sense. But I think it's like the internet, where over time it'll create more jobs than it deletes. But I think it's just I'd say it's an evolution, right? So going back to inclusivity and education and all that, these are tools that help that accelerate inclusivity, right? These things allow somebody who can't type fast to speak and ask the AI to do things. So it's a inclusivity tool in that sense.
Okay.
So that's how I think about it.
Ms. Fung, any comments on AI and how that's affecting your business or your workforce?
Yeah, I just want to share our practice about the the training, yeah, for the employee. So currently we build the LMS system, learning management system, yeah. And there we build a lot of training course related to the business and development skill for all employee. So we encourage that all our employee can access there and learn. Yeah. And beside the online training, we also apply the in-person training. And whenever we have the executive team, in the U.S. or Europe, they visit us. We also request them to conduct the training related to the leadership experience, to share with the experience with our manager in Vietnam. So I think that this also the good opportunity for our manager in Vietnam to learn the experience and to grow. Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fung.
yeah.
Andreas?
Yeah, generative AI is for sure used also already here in Vietnam. So we have application in the plant where we use in automated optical inspection machines AI, which gives us much better preciseness with regard to failure finding. But our company introduced already for some time, even for every associate, an AI tool, Ask Bosch. So you can basically use that and get used to that. Even our apprentices can use that. They can ask questions, formula questions, and get then some hints which help them basically in their daily work. In our software entity, Global Software Solutions here in Vietnam, they use that really also for a lot of coding purposes. So it's very, very helpful, and it's definitely something which come more and more, and we have to basically embrace it. And that's the situation I see.
Okay. I think it's probably a good time to throw to the audience for any questions from any of our guests.
This is regarding hiring less able people into your workforce. So I'm quite curious. I think that that's actually an area where small, medium enterprises can really find some, interesting opportunities. What is your advice for getting started with this, and how can you how do you get started? How do you find the right people, and how do you ensure that this is not just a cool idea that's not easily executed, but actually implemented and long-lasting? Thank you. Oh, sorry. And my name is Timan, and I work for La Caf. It's a coffee company here in Vietnam.
We had a competitive advantage. Our founder was disabled, so that helps a lot. But it's actually just finding one person. Once you sort of get known for something, it's like, finding people out of a certain province. They'll tell their friends, and you wake up the next morning, you find out there are 50 people from that province in your company, right? So you find one first, and it all sort of works out, right? And it's, as I said, it's not that difficult. It's being open to it. So I'll give you the example that surprised me most early on when I was with Fung's company, DI Central. The one that surprised me most was that we had employees, and we were a software company, that were blind. So the question is, well, how does that work, right? And it turns out that 80% of the blind actually have some vision. And if you can figure out how to provide them the right monitors, the right goggles, then they're very good at computers, because if you're blind, your opportunity to leave the house is limited. So your engagement with your computer is much more than maybe others. And so those are some of our best employees. Right? So I think it's just about being open and then finding that first person is what I'd say.
Great question, though, and quite a brave question as well. It's like, where do we start here? How do we get started? Fung, have you got any comments? Timon, was it? Timon, yeah. Have you got any comments to Timon about how does a company start that journey?
My experience is that I collaborate with some organization. Yeah, I mean that currently we have the relationship with the development resource and development organization in Vietnam. So via this channel, they introduce us a lot of potential resource. Yeah, they are really actually the talents. And and so far we have 9 talented employee with disability in our company, and they work with us more than 10 years. Yeah.
Timon, there is also organisations, particularly in Vietnam, people like, I don't know if you've heard of KOTO, No One Teach One, that's what it stands for, where they take disadvantaged, people from, let's say, disadvantaged backgrounds, street kids, orphans, whatever it is, people with abuse, and they go through a whole training programs in many, many different disciplines, and they're always crying out for people like you in companies to say, listen, we've got an opportunity. Have you got a student who could probably fill that opportunity? And they have restaurants. There's one in here in Saigon. There's one in Hanoi, where all the staff are from their organisation, who are all just people who have had a little bit of a disadvantaged upbringing, but now they're working in the workforce and ready to go out to companies like yours. So things like companies like that, KOTO, get in touch with them, and they have, like Bosch have these training programs that you can access them and say, we'd love to have one or two of your students with us. It's a good place to start. Okay. Any other questions at all?
I have a question because I think this is important because this is an investment conference. So one of the things that Huân Lê, we've talked about before, is when, with Rain Scales, when you had made it known or promoted before that your company is a company that hires people with disabilities, the valuation actually went down. And so what you've had to do then is hide from clients and customers that you actually are a company that hires people with disabilities. Can you talk more about why the decision making behind that, and how is that appropriate? And if that's something, if we're moving towards this down this road of building an inclusive workforce, we can't do it if companies are losing money because they're perceived as being lower value because the work is quote unquote lower value. Thank you.
Absolutely. It was one of the most interesting experiences. We had won contracts with Japanese companies and European companies, and when I looked at the rates, they were lower than the industry average, right? And then when we visited the customers, it was apparent why. They thought they were doing us a favor, okay? So you have to change the narrative, right? The quality of our work was as good or better than our competitors, right? Regardless of the workforce. Right, but they viewed our relationship as one of charity, right, and that didn't work. And so we actually took those elements out of the slide or put them in the very back. We used to sort of lead with those elements, and we took them and put them in the back, right? And so since then, our rates are now higher than industry average. Right, and so that's been our experience with this. It's a competitive advantage, but you don't want to be viewed as a charity.
Juan, do you have any comments? It's a great question, by the way. Do you have any comments on that, Juan, about the perception of your business changing? Talking to the yes, yeah.
I'll tell you, it was true in the U.S. too. So I mentioned that we were an American company, primarily owned by Vietnamese people, right? We hid that as well, because it was a competitive disadvantage. I very intentionally never applied to be a minority-owned business, right? And I don't know if that's the result was the valuations we got, but I know that the minority-owned businesses that registered as such, that my friends were running, never got the valuations we got, right? It's a perception issue that I don't know you can overcome, right? Or at least we couldn't.
Let me give you some perspective from a U.S. government perspective, right? I think that from an inclusive workforce perspective, the U.S. government is set out to reward company on contracts where they utilize minority businesses, small disadvantaged business, as well as disability companies. Part of that should be a national policy to reward folks to utilize those underserved community. I think that it's a recognition that disabled people or minorities folks or others are as equally capable to do the job as others, right? So it takes away the discrimination, if you will, right? In this case, what you experience through.
Yeah, it is. It's. I remember when I was in a previous university, we used to offer scholarships for, and we had to make a decision about which area we gave scholarships for, and in the end, we pinpointed one area, which was blind people, and we worked with the Vietnamese Society for the Blind, and every semester we brought 2 blind people into the university, and by after a few years, we had a good cohort, which was really quite an exciting cohort. And funny, Juan, as you say, do you know what they all studied? Computing. All of them, and absolutely phenomenal computers. So I think that sort of whole perception of that with that disability comes some sort of disadvantage in their skills is totally a wrong attitude to take. So thank you. Any other questions? Yes, there's one here, I see.
My name is Loan Leung from Pacific Link Foundation. I am program director of. Regarding to education and talking about human trafficking and forced labor and even like online scam right now in current situation. So I have a question about how you conduct a lot of training, vocational trainings, and so how we prepare for the job seeker and the migrant worker and the young population, even how we can protect them before they go to different other location within Vietnam or other countries. Thank you.
Great question. Very, very important question. How do we how do we protect our young people who are coming into training with us for when they go out to overseas or to different companies? How are we protecting those people? Any takers, Andreas?
Let's say we comply to legality issues very strictly. And we also provide to our trained associates guidance. So we have special training programs where we also make them aware of certain things. Let's say human trafficking is something we watch very closely and make definitely sure that in Bosch this is not an issue at all.
The only thing, maybe one point I could say in terms of it's a great question, but in terms of my reference, we have students obviously at universities who go off and do internship programs. And now in the old days, it used to be find an internship, yes, go and do that. But now we had a lot of feedback, not so much about mistreatment of students, but certainly students being taken advantage of by go and make the tea, go and do this, go and do this. They weren't actually getting a workplace experience. They were just being used as sort of runners, go and get the coffee for everybody. So we actually took a point of going and meeting every single employer. Now, that, again, takes time to do that, it takes effort to do that, but you had to go and meet the employer, and the employer had to prove that they were worth one of our students. And that's how we got around that, so that students actually went to a workplace and had a real work experience, that they weren't making the tea and coffee and things, they were actually doing the jobs that they were supposed to be doing. And we went, we went and did a report on the student, but we also did a report on the company as well. And they had to qualify to be worthy of one of our students. So that's maybe a way that you could protect, finding out more about where the people are going to go to. I know it's a slightly difficult scenario, and it takes a lot of effort, but it is worth doing, because you're right, those people need protecting. Yeah, great question.
Do you think that by being more inclusive has a positive impact on your overall workforces and improves retention rates?
Great question, to the point. Any takers? Does it have an overall positive impact on your business?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned one of them, which is that I think our workforce is better. We have access to more talent is the very big one. Okay. But also, I think there are soft things that it's hard to quantify. This I don't know how to quantify, but it feels like just you're working with nicer people. Never mind the disabled folks, but the people who I'd say are more willing to be open-minded are joining your workforce. right? And those people, it just feels like a nicer company than I would anticipate otherwise, right?
Andreas?
Yeah, I also have to say that. So I have gone through a long journey also with Bosch, and inclusion and openness also for different people with different orientation is something which has helped us as a company in total. We are more diverse, and really the team is getting better by this. So the decision making is getting better, and that is really something what I over the time working for Bosch experienced, and I love that. I really have to say that, and I promote that by myself also.
I know. So anyway, thank you. Thank you to our panel, many of whom who've come from overseas and travelled a long way to be here. I think you pointed out earlier that this has been a very good conference so far, a very important conference, and thank you to Mimi and the organisers for putting this together. It has been a very exciting and some great sessions going on. Hopefully this was one of them. And so thank you to my guests, and thank you to all for being here.